We're running a little late, and I heard that Joel is on the phone. All right, good morning. Welcome to the December 4th, 2023 Grants Pass City Council Workshop, and we're going to get started talking about our organizational engagement survey. Aaron Kubik.
Great. Good morning, Mayor, Council. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Spence Taylor from Star 360. He is going to be coming up and providing you with a detailed debrief on our satisfaction engagement survey. The survey is something that we really hold as an important aspect and tool for being a high-performing organization, and I want to thank all of my colleagues for the excellent participation, which you will hear in the report that we had with regards to this survey. It's a key point for us to be able to hear from our colleagues in this fashion, for us to be as the best organization we can be. This will help us provide additional input to provide for positive work culture, and also to help with our product outcomes and our system integration of being a high-performing organization. This survey and the results will also allow us to capture crucial insights into our colleagues' needs and our perspectives of the organization. The strengths and opportunities for improvement are things that we'll be able to work on in the future. It increases our opportunity to make change that positively influences the organization based on hearing the voices of our colleagues. This will ultimately also allow us to have an edge on retention of quality colleagues as we continue to be a high-performing organization and build on our internal work culture. So looking forward to our next steps in working with Star 360, working with the executive team, and working with my colleagues to dive down deeper into the survey and the results and making things the best they can be. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Spence Taylor.
Thank you, Aaron. Mayor, members of council, all attendees, great to see you all, the X-team, and member of the press. We're excited to have everyone here. I'm delighted to be here. You have a beautiful city. My first time to this lovely place. I flew in when it was dark, and so I was sharing with some of you. It was nice to see your beautiful mountains and just so much to be loved here. I can tell why you all care so much about this great place. And I'm thrilled about this process as well. I love this experience because as we get into a few things here, data is really just the beginning of change. I'm very much a believer of data-driven decision-making and making changes based off of feedback from as many people as we can possibly listen to at once. That's one of the neat things about the engagement survey, is it's really difficult, for example, for each of you to go and interview every employee in this organization, any one person. That would be almost impossible to do that effectively. But this allows us to capture the voices of everyone and try to distill it down into some meaningful initial results that allow us to draw some conclusions and then plan for positive progress and change. So I really love doing this for organizations of different types and sizes, and I will set an expectation here that this is collaborative, so please feel free to ask questions as we go. I like to mention this principle, the ask then act or don't ask principle. I know that's a mouthful, say that 10 times fast, right? But really the idea here is that as soon as we ask employees and leaders what they think, and give them the chance to share, there's an implication that as we receive their feedback, we're going to do something about it. So we're going to take action. So that's already been decided, that there will be meaningful action taken moving forward. I know that everyone here is committed to that, and I and my team at STAR are excited to be part of that process. So I just always like to, I didn't prepare that point uniquely for you. I share that with everybody that I do this with. And also, just that no data lives in a vacuum, and what I mean by that is that I know that all of you have your daily experience, you have personal interactions, you have, I know there was another survey done in the past, like you have all of that data, so I kind of like to say bring all that with you and then see if this can add some clarifying insights and additional layers of value, and then make decisions based off of all of it. This is not intended to be a single point that tells you everything that you need to know. But rather just give you some unique additional details and perspective. The first rule of feedback, as the bullet says here, is just that all feedback is good feedback as long as we're willing to do something about it. And I share that same principle when I'm doing individual leader coaching sessions and giving feedback to executives and employees. Just as we receive feedback, if we lean into action, that's really where we get the value. I already mentioned this, but just to reemphasize, this should be an active discussion. So if there's a point that's either confusing, you have an insight, a question, whatever it is, please share those as we go. Aaron has shared with me that we don't necessarily have a cap on our time, and so we can be as thorough and go as deep as we need to. I neglected at the beginning, by the way, to thank Mr. Kubik and his team, the X team, as well as I wanted to do a quick shout out to Diane Phelan. She and Karen both helped this morning with some last minute just adjustments and refinements to make sure that this is as good as it can be. So I really appreciate everyone jumping in and helping out with our last minute preparations there. This is just the simple model for change that we use, how change happens. So we've done the measure portion. We've had, I've had interviews with most of you members of council, members of the X team, kind of from a qualitative data collection standpoint. There will be some follow-on information flowing from those interviews, and then the engagement survey itself. Those are kind of the two major steps that we're taking for measurement. What we're doing today is really about informing, and then later today I'll be meeting with Aaron and the X team to really transition more fully into the planning portion and kind of the so what factor of, we have all this data, we have all this information, now what are we going to do about it? And of course, the most important part, if we just get the MIP done and fail to act, then it's all for nothing. So we really lean into action, as I already said. And just to give you a little bit more of a granular feel for where we're headed from here, the survey itself is complete, the reports are prepared, today is debrief, and then this week we're really focused on having action planning workshops in addition to the X team session that will happen later today. We're also having several smaller group sessions with kind of at the division level essentially to do action planning down at that level. So all of that will result in a combined change plan. The target date for that currently is December 15th, and then we'll really settle into a cadence of iterative feedback and progress checks to make sure that we're making actual progress and we can remeasure and assess how effectively we are in our action planning. Okay, so with that, we'll go ahead and transition into some of the data. First, there were 250 people invited to participate in the survey. You can see that 208 people responded, which is an excellent, 83% is excellent. As you see, our benchmark for all organizations responding to first-year surveys is about 76%. So nice to see that you're above that. That just implies a couple of things, that people are willing to share their voice, that they believe that we care. Just some of those ideas kind of are implicit in that number. We actually don't like to see it get up into the upper 90s, like 98 to 100, because then it starts to feel compulsory. We never want people to feel like they have to respond, because when someone's forced to respond to something, they tend to not share how they would, or how they actually think if they're doing it because they care and they want to participate, if that makes sense. So 83 is actually just a really good sweet spot for the type of participation we'd like to see. All right, and I'll kind of orient you. As we go through this, you'll see several different bar charts that look similar to this. And you'll hear me use the term favorability quite a bit, and unfavorability maybe sometimes. Really where those terms come from, favorability is responses to the survey that were either a 4 or a 5, so agree or strongly agree to that particular question, or to all questions. We're going to look at some very high-level response data first, but then as we start to do some drill downs, you'll see those tied to specific questions. So when you see the initial percentage favorability, that's a 4 or a 5, neutral is 3, and then the unfavorability is disagree or strongly disagree. So that's kind of I come from a military background, so I'm basically orienting you to your map, so to speak. So that's hopefully will make this process of digesting the data a little more effective. All right, here's your first initial look at some of the highest level data. I just call this the dashboard because it gives you just a couple of indices here. Total favorability, so again, of all responses from all people, the percentage of people that answered agree, strongly agree was 77%. That's a very strong favorability score for, again, any organization, particularly of your size. And then we've broken questions in the survey down into 3 categories. We have purpose questions. There are 10 questions for each of these. Purpose, leadership, and culture. And of course, you can see those percentages here. So the area of greatest strength in terms of that highest level is the purpose category. you'll be able to see, and I know you all have received a copy of this report. You can see the specific questions that tie to each one of those 3 pillars. But it's great to see the purpose category is the highest area of performance, because especially in our post-COVID world, we know that people are more purpose-driven than ever. We want to do things that we care about and be involved with things where we feel like we can make a difference. So just, again, these are like headline comments, and we'll get into some more details here in just a few minutes, but just at the highest level, that's a really excellent sign that people feel purpose-driven.
Spence, just to clarify, that means 77% gave a 4 or 5?
Yes, ma'am. Yep,
Okay,
that's
thank
correct.
you.
Yeah, so all of these are favorability scores, all 4 of the percentages you see here on the screen. Okay, so here's your purpose index. I know that the utility of this maybe is not as high as it could be just in terms of the small text, but really the purpose of this is carried out in the report you have in front of you, so you can read each one of these questions. I'll make a lot more comments about each of these 3 indices as we get into the total results, because then there will be context, because we're seeing actual scores at the question level. So I'll go fairly quickly for this portion, just for these 3 slides, but I'll briefly show these to you. But then again, you have the data in front of you, and we'll take time to explore this together as we get in more deeply. All right, here's a look at our high 5, is how we refer to this. These are the 5 highest scores in the results. So number 1, at 94%, again, 94% favorability. So 94% of people who responded said either agree or strongly agree to the statement, I am deeply committed to helping this organization succeed. And again, as you see, your highest area being purpose, like that's one of the reasons that that's the case. So it's a challenge to get people to feel that way. I'll just say that, like it's not an easy task to get people to agree at such a level as this. So I think kudos to all of you for helping create an environment where that's the case. I also will just point out that 3 of the top 5 do come from that purpose category. So that's another great representation of some strength here for your organization. Number 2, we'll see this present, not just as the question itself, but the idea of strength at the team level. And Aaron and I spoke about this a bit this morning, but there is clear confidence at that team level, the people that I work with. And again, we'll look at lots of examples of that. But I just want to highlight that as more of a theme throughout the results, that culture piece of the team culture piece is what I really want to emphasize there. And then you can see the others. Understanding what's expected at work is really important, just expectations management in general. If people think they know what their leaders want, but then they go and execute and they executed something different than what was expected, then that can create a lot of frustration and things. So again, having that at 91% is a great foundational piece of the overall work experience. And being proud of the results my team produces, again, there's that team theme coming up again in the top 5. And immediate supervisor having confidence in my abilities, that would also be considered a team level question. So all of those really emphasize how things are going quite well at the team level. And of course, we're looking at both ends of the spectrum here. I don't want this to come across as me leaning more into positive than the highs than the lows. So here's your 5 low. Again, I'm here as an outside set of eyes to be an objective third party to provide what I'm seeing in contrast with other organizations of a similar size and type, and that's the value I hope to bring to this process. So here are your 5 low scores. You have supervisors or grants pass, have an exciting vision for the future. That's at 49% favorability. As we get down into the all response data that's a little bit further along in the report, you'll see that for some of these lower scores, in particular these first 3, conflict management, so managing conflict effectively, and then trusting the executive staff at grants pass, have very high neutral scores. So I want to just make sure that this is presented in the right context, that 54 is the low 5, for example, for these 2, the second and third items here. If you take that neutral population and consider them on the fence, then we would call that an opportunity group. There can be some action taken in the near term to hopefully win those folks over, so to speak, and help them to feel better about how we manage conflict here and trusting the executive staff and feeling like there is an exciting vision for the future of the organization. I reflected on that first one, the lowest score there at the 49%, quite a bit, and I think it's a pretty big challenge to create an exciting vision for the future of a city. I'm not saying, of course, it's impossible. You can certainly do it, but just by the nature of it's not a business, right? I mean, you're not creating a certain number of products. You're not paying out bonuses to profit sharing. I mean, it's a public institution. I'm sure, though, that there is a way to drive forward in that area. I just wanted to mention that I think that's a unique thing here in the context of the world that you're in as a municipality. So I'm excited to brainstorm later in this process and come up with ways to make vision more exciting to people. But I think it's understandable that that's an area that people may not be as enthusiastic about. The last two here, the lows, supervisors within this organization inspire people, and that falls into that leadership category at 58%. And I receive appropriate recognition when I do great work, 63%. That's a culture question. So again, 3 of the lowest 5 from the leadership pillar or the index, and then 2 from culture. So you have no purpose questions here on the low 5, which again, that's something that's nice to emphasize. So hopefully you're kind of thinking, okay, well maybe as we action plan and look at the steps we'll be taking after this, we'll prioritize leadership and how people perceive leaders and what can we do to build confidence and trust there. And for me, I don't know what was in the mind of each person that responded, but I think leadership means pretty much everybody in this room, on the council side as well as the X-team side, and of course the collaboration that happens with across the groups there. So it's exciting to have this data and to think of how we can shape things positively going forward.
Spence, can we go back real quick?
Yeah,
I don't
of course.
understand what the percentages mean on the low end of things. How do you calculate like a 49%? What's that coming from?
Yeah, so that's still a favorability score. So that's 49% of people who responded answered either 4 or 5.
4 or 5. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's the first. We're going to do some demographic breakouts, and here's the first of those, which is our leadership view. So of all people that responded, we just put them in essentially 2 buckets, as you see. So executive team, there were 6 respondents, and then all others. I always like to do this because even before I see the data, like this is always the case. It tends to be true that the executive team of any organization feels more favorable than everybody else. And I think it's because, this is just what I've observed, they are more involved in setting the vision, and they're more involved in setting executive priorities, and they get to see things at a little bit broader perspective. Whereas if you contrast that with someone who is in public works or in the police department or whatever, they're seeing more just their lane, and their experience holistically is more limited. So just generally speaking, again, this is to be expected. Again, even the gap between the 77 and the 93 there, so 16%, that's a pretty normal gap for pretty much everybody else compared to how the executive team sees things. So that's why I wanted to start with that one, because it is important to recognize that and to start kind of a thought process around how can we close that gap? How can we help people feel that are not in executive leadership roles to start to feel more favorable just at the highest level overall. Any other thoughts or questions on this one? Okay, we'll go to the tenure. Again, I'll do my best to call things out that are either normal from what I see for all organizations and abnormal. This is another area that is normal. I call this just the C-shape structure of data, where people that are newer in tenure tend to feel more favorable, and then the first few years go by and kind of the honeymoon is over. That's kind of how I usually frame it. It's like, okay, I've been here for a while, and there tends to be a dip, and then things tend to come back, as you see there. You know, we don't get all the way back up into the 80s, but we have a jump back up to 75 at the 16 plus mark. You know, of course, I don't know exactly why that happens, but generally people that have been with the organization for 16 plus years are probably in a leadership role, or they've just decided that this is where I want to be. Like they've made a decision that this is their future. So either one of those, it's true. I think that's why we tend to see that C shape, because people either transition out and go find something different as they hit that kind of the decline from 4 to 7, 8 to 15, and go find something that fits them better, or they commit to stick around long term. Again, this is all responses still. We'll stay at this top level for a little bit here and then drill in just a few minutes. Here's one of the most interesting views, I think, just getting into the division or department level. And again, I'll just say here that you'll notice there are some divisions that aren't represented, and that's because there were less than 5 responses. We have this confidentiality threshold where we're not showing any data where the response was less than 5, if that makes sense, 5 people that fit within that particular demographic. So that's why we're somewhat limited here, but it's still very interesting just to consider the variation that we see as you kind of trace. I like to always kind of trace the leading edge of that green bar, the favorability down, and then ask questions like, okay, well, why does finance feel so much more favorable than the Parks Division? Again, it's not a Grand Canyon sized gap, I would say, but it's significant enough that it's worth asking some questions there. Part of this process, as we go through this high-level debrief, should include us jotting down curiosities or questions, like the example that I just gave, and then carrying those questions forward with us into conversations that we have with people throughout the city, throughout the organization, and say, hey, we noticed this in the engagement results. What are your thoughts? Why do you think you as a member of this team feel differently than these other people over here that are a member of that team? Like, do you see something that maybe you can shed some light and give us some perspective and help us get a better grasp on some of these gaps? So I'll give you just a minute to continue to look through this. And again, all others, that was those under 5, we basically combine those together to provide some awareness of those smaller divisions or departments and put them together in a group. So that's why you see that all others are at the bottom. I will just make one other comment here before we move on to the next slide, just about that neutral group. Again, we typically think of people in that group as an opportunity to come back over to feel more favorable. So just the bigger neutral scores create an area of interest, like the fire, for example, with the 18%. It's a decent number of the 23 there that basically have not for sure decided whether they feel more favorable or less, and so there's some chance to have positive influence. Okay, here's our ethnicity, the EEO, equal employment opportunity and race ethnicity breakdown. Again, we're somewhat limited, just we don't have enough numbers to represent anything more than these 3, but it's still really interesting to look at this. And we do have some pretty high neutral scores there for the Hispanic and Caucasian populations there. I didn't mention this before, you all probably are tracking, but the N value is just the number of people that are represented for that. Okay, and then we have, this is probably our most detailed, I think our most detailed view as we look at the job class code. Again, anything from 5 respondents and up, these are the groups that are available. As I mentioned a minute ago, as you have some of these curiosity questions that you jot down, one way to begin exploring that doesn't require conversations, although of course that's still an important step, is to go through the comments and basically look for evidence that, because you might have an initial idea, you might think, I think it's because of this. And so establish that as your, if you're in statistics, like as your null hypothesis or however you want to frame it, and then go look for evidence and try to see if the comments support either your idea or if you can see a trend or a pattern in the comments. The comments are, I'll tell you, I mean, it's quite a process to go through all the comments. It's the biggest chunk of this report, of course, but it's, I think, the most valuable part of any process like this, because those are individual voices. And I'll talk more about kind of best practices around how to analyze comments and some of the themes that have stood out to me a little bit later, but I just wanted to make sure to call that out here as we're starting to think about, again, some gap analysis. The dispatcher one stands out, I'm sure, to more than just me. There are 8 people represented there, and their favorability score is sitting at 56%, probably represents an area of opportunity. And again, 22% being neutral and 22% unfavorable, like we have a pretty unique distribution there of that data. So let's establish some initial ideas of what those of you aware of that department and the division, what's going on with them, and then have some meaningful conversations to follow up and hopefully gather the story behind those numbers so that we can help shape that in a positive direction. I think also, my last several comments have been more focused on the lower scores. I also want to call out some higher scores here Things, for example, in the utility billing specialist class code, as well as the municipal services worker class code, like those both sitting at 83. And that's really exciting to see that those people in those roles feel very favorable, again, in contrast to some of these lower scores. And they beat the overall favorability by a fair margin as well. So it's great to see. Okay, so you are all aware this is an engagement survey, and one of the values of that is we have an engagement profile that we were able to draw out. So these engagement questions you see in the upper right of the slide statistically represent the areas that are the best predictors of whether someone is engaged. And the way we really define engagement is that those people that are most highly engaged or fully engaged, as you see it here, are those types of people that are willing to use their discretionary time, their free time, come volunteer on the weekend. Some of you made some comments about how many amazing people there are among the staff who are willing to do things like that, and those are your engaged people. So that's kind of the way to think about engagement. And again, these questions, the engagement questions, are the best measurement, not in my opinion, but statistically speaking. I worded that weird. It is my opinion, but it's not driven from my opinion, but it's driven by the statistical side of things, that those are the predictors of someone using their discretionary efforts, which nobody can force anybody to use their discretionary effort. If you've got an hour lunch, then you can take your hour lunch, but some people choose to eat real quick and then use the other 50 minutes to work on a project that they care about, for example. So anyway, just to illustrate that a bit further. So as you read through those engagement questions, that kind of helps you create a little bit of a boundary around what we mean by these scores. So obviously the total engagement score is higher than our overall score, and the reason for that is that we're just referring to this set of the 7 questions you see in the engagement questions section. One of the most important, again, statistically speaking, holistically speaking, is that number 25 you see there at the bottom of that upper right box that says, I am willing to refer my close friends and family to Grants Pass as a great place to work. We call that, this is often a similar wording is used in customer surveys, and it's called the Net Promoter Score. So it's essentially, are you willing to endorse us as an organization as somewhere that you should either do business or somewhere that you should choose to invest your work life, your career. So again, you'll see those actual scores, raw scores down below as we get a little further into this, but I always like to bring that one to the surface as an important piece of this. And then again, you can see the other elements that are included in the scope of what we mean when we say engagement. So you have fully engaged, or total engagement, 84%, again, really strong. That represents 175 employees, 70% of those being fully engaged. It's not uncommon to see a larger percentage in the key contributor group, and so it's exciting to see that we have a significantly higher portion in the fully engaged. Of that 84%, 70% of those are fully engaged. Again, obviously 146 is not a small number of people, so it's great. And then on the other end, kind of that at-risk group, we also sometimes call the opportunity group because they're somewhat on the fence in the sense that they're obviously, some of their responses were engaged, some of them were disengaged, and so they're in between somewhere. So there are 16 people represented by that 18%, and just with the rounding, 17 on the disengaged. So those are both areas to think about and to include in both the comment analysis and follow-up conversations to try to, again, I obviously am a fan of the phrase, the story behind the numbers, because we have a number. The number itself doesn't really tell us much, so we need to go find the story, and that can be done through the 2 things that I've already repeated. Okay, now we get into the all response data, and I suspect and I hope that this will be a part of the meeting where we can have some deeper discussion and start to look at things a little bit more in detail. So feel free to call anything out that stands out to you, or ask a question, make a suggestion, whatever it might be. Again, I know those of you who are just seeing this remotely, it's a lot to take in on a slide. We'll stay on this slide for a few minutes here, as long as we need to. So just to kind of orient you, it's fairly intuitive, but just to make sure we're all clear, the left-hand column is the question number, so that's all that is. Then you have the stem, or the description of the question itself, and then your favorability, neutral score, and unfavorable. As those of you over divisions prepare to receive your reports, you'll have an additional layer where it shows you how your division performed against the total, if that makes sense. So you have that additional context. But here we're staying at that organizational level. So as you're processing and thinking about this and maybe preparing a comment or question, I'll just share with you that the thing that stands out most to me on this page, and this is, you could look at this as essentially the top half of the survey, is that we have a lot of mention of team and supervisor. You kind of scan through the wording there. Again, first is deeply committed to the organization. We've already kind of talked about that because it's within the top 5. But then as you look through, and these are all strong favorability scores across the entire page, the lowest being 80% favorability, you see, I trust my immediate supervisor. My immediate supervisor is a great listener. I'm proud of the results my team produces. I understand what's expected. As a team, we respect one another. Like a lot of these have to do with, if you just think about your own work experience, that's probably the most important predictor of whether you choose to stay. We often say, and the data supports this, that people don't leave organizations, they leave leaders. So if an immediate supervisor is the most influential, tends to be at least, in almost every case, the most influential leader in a person's work life and has the most influence over how much autonomy they have, how they're held accountable, what expectations are set, how clear is communication, all those types of just the daily aspect of work are key drivers of whether someone chooses to stick around. So again, I think that this represents a really strong foundational piece on that team level. And I'll come back to this as we need to, but just for a minute, I'll go to the second half. As we continue the idea behind the analysis that I've begun to verbalize here and look at the second half of the survey all the way down to that 49, so we have from 79 favorability down to 49, we start to see more questions that have to do with the organization as a whole, like that executive staff question, for example, the conflict management. So think about how that's phrased. It doesn't say we manage conflict effectively as a team. I'm confident if that was the case that we would see that score quite a bit higher because they're thinking about, again, people they work with every single day. But there's some experience being had out there that causes that score to be quite a bit lower because they're thinking about it more as an organization as a whole, that conflict is not being managed as effectively as it could be, just as an example. So the point of this is that we have a lot more presence of team questions in the top half, a lot more presence of those organization level questions in the bottom half. That is not atypical at all. It's very normal. The top 2 challenges that we tend to see organizations have just as a whole is top-down communication and department-to-department collaboration. So top-down and sideways essentially is kind of how I like to represent that. And again, the data shows that that's similar here. And we see that represented even more valuably in the comment section of the report. We have some of that story behind those trends that we're seeing in the data represented in the comments. So I'll pause for a minute. I know I've been talking for a while now, and invite any questions, thoughts, observations you have for this all response data or anything up to this point. Happy to field any questions or hear comments.
Rick.
Please.
Thank you. I'm really enjoying hearing the results. So the council is our leaders of the city, and when we look at this statistics and see the strong points and the weak points, and like on the previous slide, there was the 49%.
Yeah.
And while I realize that's focusing on the supervisors per se in Grants Pass, but we could find ourselves also in that group. Mm-hmm. Do you have information or ideas that we can review to see how we can do a better job?
Great question. Thank you, Councilor Rick. I appreciate that. Yes. So one of the exercises that I've done, and you're welcome to do, if you pull up the digital version of this report, you can use Control F, just do a find, and enter a search term. So you could enter City Council, for example. If you're, as councilors, if you want it in the mayor, you want to see how people perceive City Council and how many mentions there are, whether their overall perception is positive, negative, in between, whatever it is. There are a lot of mentions of City Council in the comments section, and so that should give you some perspective of first, whether people are thinking about you as part of that supervisor group, like are you seeing evidence for that? I don't think there's as much evidence for that. It's more the executive level leadership, I think, is where City Council would probably fit in people's minds based on comments. Go ahead.
So while I find the results and the input from the different individuals is interesting, I like to be a person, I want to consider myself wanting to learn more.
Sure. Sure.
So if I want to learn more in this area to be a better leader, are there books to read or that you recommend, or have you actually put together segments that would indicate if you're in this group, these are A, B, C, D things you could do that would improve you in your supervisory level?
Sure. Oh, that's a great question too. I'm a big reader. I love, business books. Five Dysfunctions of a Team is one that comes to mind. Again, that's a pretty popular one. You may have read that one. I have a whole list, honestly, that I could give you after if you'd like, and I'm happy to kind of create that as somewhat of a resource list. In the context of this particular process, I really think the most valuable thing, and it's, I guess, somewhat unfortunate, just in terms of resources, is the best thing you can do is have conversations with people as you encounter them doing their role in the community and get a feel for, I know that's not very helpful because it's not super structured, but that is some of the best data because it's captured real time. It's them in their moment, if that makes sense, and how do they perceive things, how do they feel about things just at a random moment in performing their role. Do they seem happy? Do they seem sad? If you ask them a question about who do you define as leaders in this community or leaders at Grants Pass, how do they answer? You know what I mean? Like you start to kind of create your own little score chart and create tick marks that hopefully start to tell a story for you uniquely as an individual, but of course role-wise as a council and then as an ex-team. Anyway, so it's not a simple answer, I guess is really what it comes down to, but there are certainly some steps that can be taken. We can discuss further if you'd like.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, sir. Okay, I'll go ahead, please, Councilor Yunker.
I just think it's kind of interesting that if you look at all these supervisors, they trust their supervisor, their strong sense of work, their supervisor's ideas, and then you go way down here down at the bottom and it says sets the standards. Like, that's kind of odd that they like everything about their supervisor, but the standards. It's really interesting to me that they trust their supervisor in many ways, but they don't set the supervisor does not set the standards when it comes to the leader they want to be. But I think that's just very odd.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Thank you for bringing that up because in most surveys that we go through, there are at least one or two items that seem a bit counterintuitive like this. And so we have to, if we really want to understand it, we have to go through this process that you're probably already tired of hearing me talk about, but it's important, is this whole comment analysis, individual conversations. Let's go out and come up with a way to further research some of these perceived disparities, because there has to be some reason that there's a difference in their minds collectively. In order to gain that awareness and understand the narrative, we've got to go extract it through meaningful interactions and effective communication. So yes, thank you for bringing it up. I think there are a few different areas like that. Like even looking at the number 17 there with 86% favorability behind I trust my immediate supervisor, and then the 54% favorability with the number 19 we've already talked about, I trust the executive staff at Grants Pass. It's not unusual for there to be a lower perception of trust when there are degrees of separation, just by nature of less familiarity, less of a personal relationship with those leaders, some of these types of things. That's not really unusual, but that is a pretty sizable gap. And so like, let's try to process that and understand why that gap exists, and then make sure we integrate closing that gap, obviously bottom to up, not pulling the top down, as we move forward for the months ahead. So that's another one that I think fits in that category, that it seems somewhat counterintuitive, but there's a little bit of maybe a hypothesis that can emerge behind that. Other thoughts, questions, observations? Okay, feel free to jump in, or we can go backwards as we need to. We were fortunate to have some additional questions added to this process. So here are the favorability scores for the additional 12 questions that were added to the survey. I know some of you were involved in that and really appreciate the additional layer of data collection that we were able to add to this. So on this first, again, similarly divided, although it's just a list of 12 questions, but we've kind of divided this into the top half and bottom half. So from 96% favorability down to 84%. I'll just quickly go through these. I am encouraged to provide excellent customer service when interacting with the general public, 96%. So that's amazingly strong. It's great to see. We've only got 3% neutral, so just really a couple individuals, and 1% unfavorable. So I guess statistically that's probably 2 individuals and 3 or 4 on the neutral. So very small. So it's great that people are aligned around this idea that it's vital we provide excellent customer service to the community. I've received ethics training and orientation during my time as an employee at Grants Pass. Again, similar scores. The only flip there is the neutral and unfavorable are swapping places, but still 96% favorability. So that's excellent that you all have prioritized ethics training and making sure there's clarity around what it means to be ethical here as members of your organization. I feel my coworkers consistently behave in an ethical manner. Again, similar, 89% with 8% neutral, 3% unfavorable. I feel comfortable discussing perceived problems with my immediate supervisor, also 86%. My supervisor welcomes my ideas and input regarding creative solutions and/or suggestions for improving the efficiency of the organization, 85%. And I feel my supervisor consistently exhibits exemplary ethical behavior. That's another supervisor-related question that it's great to see it at a high level there, 84%. And then I receive ongoing training in my field. So these next couple are about training. The ongoing training I receive in my field is helpful, so 83 and 82% respectively there. When I present a concern to my supervisor or another supervisor, I feel satisfied with the resolutions or explanations, 68%. And I've seen similar scores to questions like that in the past. Often one way to increase that score is not necessarily to take more action on suggestions, because we all only have a certain amount of resource and we can only prioritize a certain number of things, but it's to create a feedback loop and make sure that people feel heard, and that if you weren't able to act on a suggestion, they understand why as much as possible. So those are a couple of ways to close out. I feel my ideas are valued and then acted upon. So we start to get down into the lower scores here for this particular set of these 12 questions. At 65%, again, you have a little bit larger neutral population at 23%. There is another supervisor. That question was actually tied into, I feel comfortable discussing perceived problems with my immediate supervisor. There was an if and statement there. Basically, if not, then there is another supervisor within the organization that I feel comfortable discussing perceived problems with. So that's 64%. I will tell you, just from a data integrity standpoint, that some of the organizations, there really is no additional formal supervisor, if that makes sense, because they're a small team. And so there's maybe a little bit of gray, if that makes sense, in that data. Because if there's the absence of a supervisor, someone may disagree with that, or a second supervisor, I should say, another supervisor in the organization. So it really depends on how they read it. If they read it as it was intended, which I think the intent is great behind it, just having somebody else to go to if that first line leader is not available, or is maybe they don't feel comfortable for whatever reason, having someone else to go to. So that's the intent, but it could be read the other way as well, of having a formal next line to go to. Okay, any comments or observations with these summary questions, these additional 12?
Rob?
Yes, sir, Councilor Pell.
So it looks like there's a little disconnect, or I'm not sure if I understand, between the very top question and the bottom, 39 and 40. 96% of the people feel they are encouraged to provide excellent customer service, and yet only 54% apparently feel that it is delivered. What do you make of that, or what to do about that?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. This is another thing that, so what we've seen is whenever the wording includes personal language, like I, for example, if you're basically, there's an implication that you're asking about my performance and whether I prioritize that. So if I say I am encouraged to provide excellent customer service versus we as an organization provide excellent service, it's more pointing at my performance versus my perception of our organization's performance. So that's I think why that gap exists, because people tend to think about it less personally when you ask that, the number 40 question, every Grants Pass employee versus I. Does that help at all? Does that make sense?
Actually, not at all.
Okay.
Okay, I understand that we're using the word I on number 39 at the top, But that's really all anyone could comment on, whether or not they have been encouraged to provide good customer service.
Sure.
So I is appropriate there,
Right.
and the only thing that you can really comment on accurately. But then they're asked later for their observation that it doesn't seem to be an overwhelming majority that are doing a good job at that. So even though apparently people feel that they're encouraged to do it, it doesn't seem like much of that, or as high a percentage of that is sticking throughout the organization. So I guess the question would be what to do about that.
Sure. Thank you for that. The accuracy or effectiveness of someone observing someone else's behavior is always a challenging area. That's kind of, to me, that's what this comes down to. Again, hopefully this is feeling relevant. But the other thing that we can do is go and try to make some connections to this disparity that you brought up and what we see in comments. Are there specific comments that hopefully will help us understand better why we have a gap? Again, Councilor Yunker, you brought up another one earlier. We've talked about the executive versus supervisor leadership gap, and there are several gaps here that we need to better understand. And that's why, as I shared at the beginning, data is just the start of this process. We have some data here. It's interesting. It probably creates more questions than answers at this highest level look. And then as we get more deeply into it this afternoon and throughout the week, that's where we really start to try to get into a more of a solid set of hypotheses and then confirm those hypotheses so that our action plan can be as relevant as possible as we move into meaningful change.
TJ.
I have a quick question. In the all responses category 28, I receive appropriate recognition when I do great work. I'm seeing that there are other questions that are kind of tied together, and you can garner some data from different questions. Are there any other questions along those lines that you could garner significance from?
Yes, thank you. I'm just catching up with you here. So it was, okay, number 28, I receive appropriate recognition when I do great work at 63% favorability. And you were just asking if there's any other question that would help us understand that better or that's related to that. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. There's really not another one that gives us a chance to either see the presence or absence of a gap in the same way that some of these other examples have illustrated. I would say though that I did notice several comments, both positive and constructive, potentially negative, around feedback that will help tell some of the story behind it, if that makes sense, and can certainly be included and should be included in the action planning process. So yeah, that one, we don't necessarily have a cousin to it as a formal question, but we do have comments. Thank you. Okay. Anything else at this stage? And we're almost into the home stretch here of getting into some comment analysis, which again, it's fun, big challenge for us to dive into a bit. Okay, so again, because of the overwhelming nature of comments, we use some algorithms and technology to try to help us analyze comments. And we've created kind of a table of contents of sorts with these top terms. And so it's difficult to apply what's intended here in this setting because we're in a group presentation type format meeting. But what you can do though is go and use the same find functionality in your Adobe Reader or whatever software you're using, do a Control F and copy and paste each of these terms and go and evaluate those terms because each of these appears multiple times. So if you want to go see what's being said about the 911 center, what's being said about, again, City Council, X team is another one that isn't listed here, but that's another one you could do. If you see a name of somebody or even your own name and you want to know if you're mentioned by name or someone else is mentioned by name, feel free to do that as well. Like those are a couple of ways to come at this overwhelming task of digesting many, many pages of comment data. Of course, you can consider it some light nighttime reading as well, but it may put you to sleep just because it's hard to read as a story because you got to have some more purpose-driven analysis behind it. So that's the idea here. We do have overall positive sentiment sitting at about 73%. I will tell you that that's not a perfect number because it's qualitative data, not quantitative data. So the opinion of the algorithm, I guess you could say, is that it's 73% positive. Again, on this next slide, you'll see the imperfections here. This word cloud was also created by technology. And for example, for some reason, it put continued education in red as a negative. Obviously, continued education is not negative, but anyway, so just to show you, like, we're trying to help distill things down the best that we can to give you some resource to do further discovery and exploration of the comments. There are some really amazing terms here: appreciate, encourage, honest, amazing, good customer service. Again, back to that thing that we definitely need to explore some more. Very positive. Anyway, you can see some of those additional terms that, again, you can take a similar approach and find, or do a Control F and find in the data where those terms are present. So that's really, the comment review is more of a call to action, where I would love it if you want to take some time after this and do your own process of exploring and reviewing comments. And then if you want to, I'll be here all the way till the close of business on Wednesday. I'm happy to have follow-up conversations and assist however I can with that further comment analysis. And of course, we'll be doing that in our meetings. Sir?
I just had one question as sort of a follow-up discussion. I was thinking in my head with regards to the all responses summary questions and question number 40, the one where it states every grants pass employee and supervisor provides very good, excellent customer service, and it was a 54, it was our lowest one. And I'm curious, could it be the way the question was actually asked, as it's this one question seems different than all the other questions on the survey, where the majority of the survey asks, are grants pass employees and supervisors, do they provide good quality, excellent customer service? This has every. I'm not a big fan of every, all, never, always, because it automatically puts you in an interesting situation when you're trying to respond to that more of an emotional statement almost when it says every. I believe, or is there an opportunity to where if this was worded similar to the other questions, would it have potentially had a different number? Because when you say every, immediately someone's going to say, well, no, it's not every. But in general, there is. And there's a big difference in, I think, mindset with the question and the way this one's asked.
Sure. That's a great observation. I think you're correct. I think that anytime we use, again, not just in this question, but I'm a parent of kids. My kids sometimes will get into little scuffles, and they'll say, you always, or you never, or every time, or things like that. Anytime we use absolutes, I always try to help my kids understand that few things in life are absolute in terms of always happening or never happening or every time. So it's somewhat similar here, just in the context of the data. And perhaps that's one thing that in the mind, if I'm one of your employees and I read that question, I may think to myself, well, I certainly see a lot of really good customer service, but this one time I saw an interaction where somebody got a little frustrated, so that's not every. So now I have to answer I respond on the lower end of the scale. So yeah, maybe that helps illustrate and support that idea. I would love that you brought that up. Thank you. Yes, Councilor Pell.
Yeah, I appreciate Aaron's observation on that question. It also, though, I think it would be noteworthy to also observe from that question. It doesn't say that every employee or even employees provide excellent customer service all the time. So obviously it's, well, yes, not every employee is going to do anything. It also, it does leave room for people not providing necessarily good customer service sometimes, but providing good customer service other times. So in other words, every employee may do some of both. So anyway, I think to me that's worth noting that rather than discounting that question, yes, it could have been more clear, but also not everyone does it all the time, I guess would be a better way to maybe view that.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And again, you bring up a really important point behind this entire process, which is that we could argue that there's really no such thing as a perfect question. I mean, there's lots of different ways to read a question. We all have our world that we live in and the lens through which we look at the world. And some of our lenses are more focused on one thing than another. If I have a family, which I do, then I'm going to look at risks in my community through the lens of how it affects my children. If I don't, and I'm more just on my own, then I'm going to look at that more of like, what recreational options are there for me considering, anyway, hopefully you know what I'm saying. Like, that's my lens. Your lens could be very different, and so you're going to look at things differently. That's part of the reason there aren't just 5 questions on the survey. We try to explore things from as many different angles as we can, understanding that no one question can represent either strength or weakness. We need to ask a myriad of questions, and that's why these additional questions are very helpful, because they give us more insights. And again, they create meaningful follow-on topics for us to explore, and then hopefully we take the time and invest our personal effort to go and get that story, and then we can make sure we prioritize and execute a plan that shapes the environment in a way where people feel great about Grants Pass. And many of your people do, as you've seen. So that's kind of where I would end, is just that you have a lot of really good things to build on, a lot of strengths to build on. Just like every organization, there are certainly some areas to do better. We've highlighted some of those today, and we'll be doing the important work of drilling further into those later today and throughout the week here. And that's really the what now, just to kind of bring us back to this, what's going to happen next. Because again, if we just stop today and say, mission accomplished, we're done, we've totally failed. We've got to set up a plan and go and execute that plan, and that's what's represented in the lower portion of this flow chart. So really today we're just at that second layer of action, or top layer really of debrief, but then we'll be moving into the second layer with action planning. And I know everyone here is going to be able to help shape that very importantly. So I'll leave it for any final questions or thoughts, and that's all I have for you, if not.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, we obviously have a lot of comments to read through here before we can give a lot of feedback. I did notice, quickly skimming it, a fair amount of people saying that they need more staff in their departments, and I guess, you know, the thing that comes to mind is that, you know, and people saying it's not a want, it's a need, and I think we get that. It's a matter of how to pay for it, and we do live in a relatively poor community and a tax-resistant community, and it's important, I guess, for employees to realize that we are not trying to limit them, but that we have to balance how much the city and the taxpayers can afford. It's a tough position, but
Yes.
We got a lot of great feedback here, and it sounds like overwhelmingly very positive sentiments, and, you know, even the neutrals are neutral, right? I mean, that's kind of a benchmark of just being neutral. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being with you today.
All right, next up, Caveman Pool.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the council. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Good to see you again. So Josh is our department lead on the Caveman Pool. Unfortunately, he's out today, so you got me as backup. But you only have me as backup for a few minutes because we have our consultant RSA that's going to, who's on the line today, who's going to kind of give you more of the deep dive on some of the amenities here. Scott Stolarczyk with Robertson Sherwood Architects is our consultant, and then I believe we also have Justin. He's with the Aquatic Design Group. The Aquatic Design Group is a sub-consultant to RSA. RSA is the city's primary consultant and designer on the project, and then Aquatic Design Group is another company, but they focus very specifically on the recreational pool element. Just a quick refresher before Scott comes on. So we have today as your subject the council requested to review some additional amenities before we sent this out for our professional cost estimate. This was in October at the end of a business meeting. During your conversation, this came up, and I think the cost estimator, and Scott can speak more to this, is very close and ready to go as soon as we give them the details. But we wanted to wait till today and this conversation to see what other amenities the council might like to have added in there. It relates to your council goal to maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. Here's just a quick reorientation to where we're at with the site plan and the buildings. So 9th Street is here on the left side of the screen, and then Wharton on the bottom side. So you can see there is on this phase 1 concept a reorientation of the way that the facility is laid out today, with the activity pool being kind of closer to that entry point at the corner, and then kind of probably the more significant change is that bathhouse, instead of being kind of closer to that corner, it being on that northern edge there, and oriented kind of that east-west. So that's the latest drawing. We do have the new parking lot that is on School District 7 property, combined there as well. Here's the bathhouse floor plan. This does reflect the modification. There was a community forum in October where we had about 12 people attend. There was also a survey done. About 135 people responded to the survey. At that forum, there was a comment from the YMCA about wanting to have a little bit more opportunity for the office to have a direct view of the pool. So there's this little bump out on the bottom of the bathhouse was added, but you can see there we've got kind of the reception and office on the end that's closest to 9th Street. And then kind of moving in, you've got the men's locker room, women's locker room, pool storage, and then a large mechanical room there. And then here's the latest renderings on the elevations on the bathhouses, or bathhouse. And you can, again, if you have any questions on that, Scott can be available. And then here's just a rendering kind of looking at what that intersection of 9th and Wharton might look like. Just a couple other short things before I hand it over to Scott. The YMCA did attend that October 10th forum, and after the forum, staff did have some conversations with the YMCA about some of the other amenities that might be considered. They did express some reservations about operating a facility with a high dive and a rope swing, just from the operator standpoint. And their experience at other facilities around the country with injuries and things like that. So there was that reservation voiced. We do have, as you know, already several amenities that are built in. So again, I think the goal today was to sort of introduce you to some of the other ideas that are out there that could be integrated in. The cost implications, we can discuss this more afterwards, might be more appropriate, but bottom line, we have at this point about $38,000 in the phase 1 portion of this contract remaining, with a cash balance of about $175,000 for the project. You have allocated $1.2 million of ARPA and $5 million of Urban Renewal Agency money. And then we still have that potential cost sharing for that parking lot construction. And then here are some next step alternatives, which after RSA is finished, we can come to. So Scott, are you with us on the line?
Good question. Sure.
Yes.
On the site plan, what are those red and white umbrella looking things?
So those would be exactly that, some canopies, coverage, shading for folks to sit under, some kind of shading feature. Okay,
and then to the right, looking at it from here, what's that section that's to the right of the pool? What is that now? Is that going to be grass? What is that? What's the plan?
Yeah, so that is a separate lot that is actually owned by District 7. The city has the deed for, where the primary pool facilities are, but this actually is property that's owned by District 7. That is the reason for the line there. In terms of the amenities at this point, it would just be, it does start to slope pretty good there, so that would, at this point, I think the idea would be to have it just remain grass and sort of open space.
So District 7 is volunteered that property for part of this project, or?
Well, they have not expressed any concerns with continuing, which up to this point, that's within the fenced area today. It just happens to be that the property line runs through there. Okay. Scott, are you on the line with us?
Mayor, can I ask Brad a quick question? You mentioned that the Y had concerns about potentially a platform or high dive, and I would assume that those concerns probably revolve around liability and staffing? Or do you have any more information as far as what the concerns are?
We did receive an email, and yes, that essentially are the two main, to summarize, it would be the two main concerns. This isn't really so much their concern, but, we also do have the likelihood of having to go to probably like a 13-foot depth if we added those as compared to the current. Under the city's new stormwater rules, which were adopted a couple of months ago, we do have to maintain a certain separation from groundwater. So we haven't done enough hydrogeology to know for sure, but that could be, from a design standpoint, another concern would be, do we really have the opportunity geologically, to go down another 3 feet to get that. It's not an absolute at this point, but to summarize, yeah, that would be from the design standpoint, and then the YMCA's was really the liability and the safety issues.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Is he there? Are you there, Scott? Do I need to hit something here, Karen?
No, I've seen him come on, he made some noise for a little bit, and then he just went.
If you're speaking, Scott, we can't hear you.
This is Justin. I'm going to give him a call on his cell phone. Give me 1 second.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
I could ask a follow-up question while we're waiting.
Sure.
So with regards to the additional liability for those amenities, I would assume that's something that can be addressed simply through some sort of insurance?
We have not researched that, but yes, likely. We did make a few other phone calls, and maybe that came from you, Counselor, in terms of one other example in Oregon. I think it was Madras that have an existing rope swing. We did contact their aquatics person that has been there for many, many years, but we haven't gotten information in terms of what type of rider or some other kind of insurance was in place for them. But that would presumably be, a conversation that we'd have to have.
Okay, thank you.
Rob?
So I'm not sure why the YMCA would be worried about the city's liability. Like, it's a city pool. I would assume if someone were to get sued, who got hurt, at the pool, that the city would be liable. So I'm not sure what relevance the YMCA's concerns are about liability.
Yeah, well, I think it does connect into the fact that their lifeguards are their staff. And there is a connection between the responsibilities, during when the pool is under supervision from their staff. We could get more information from you on that, but I think that's the connection. Looks like Augustus may have something to add.
In a situation like that, we'd both be named in a lawsuit.
So we could also, though, essentially have I don't know if hold harmless is the correct term, which would basically take responsibility from them. Is that not right?
You're talking about taking on indemnity from one of the entities? Like, that's probably not something I would recommend. Could you do it? Sure. But I probably wouldn't recommend it.
See if it works.
Are you there, Scott? Justin, do you want to begin? It sounds like you have microphone ability.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Again, I did. Oh,
Can you guys hear me now? Sorry. My headphones were drained of batteries, and so I had to do a switcheroo with one of my coworkers.
Okay.
Sorry about that, everyone.
Okay, great, Scott. Glad you can join us.
You know, real quick before he gets started, we have, Joel has a question.
Okay.
Go ahead, Joel.
Yeah, thank you. We don't need to answer it right now, but it has to do with the liability. I'm more concerned about people getting hurt than the liability, because I imagine the injuries are pretty severe, and do we have any discussion, or have we found out what those injuries actually are across the nation with the high dive?
Okay.
That might be a question that Justin can help give some light to, but whether we do that now or at the end of the presentation.
Okay, let's come back to that later. Go ahead with whoever and whatever you had planned for your presentation.
Okay, hold on a second here. Can everyone see my screen? I've got a kind of an aerial perspective view of the project.
No, please wait just a minute. Let's see, where is his? Where is my Teams meeting? It should be. It's showing. We're working on getting that presentation up on the screen. Because I had it open here. It was open. Because I'm just watching it. Yeah, it's weird. You got close to here. Yeah. And it is right there. There we go. Why won't it let me do it? From up here. Right here. There we go. There we go. That's what I'm gonna have to do.
All right, Scott, I think we can see if you want to share on your end.
Okay, says I'm sharing. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can. It's embedded in your other one. I don't know if you're able to enlarge it at all, but
Closing some things here.
does that work
Well,
for
good.
council? I think that's a little better. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for those delays, everyone. I'm happy to be here today and talk about features that we might want to include in the Grants Pass Caveman Pool. Just a quick orientation. Bradley had talked a little bit about the overall site plan, but to give you an update in terms of pool features that we've got built into the project right now. We do have overall, right now what the project includes are the two main pools. We've got the lap pool, which at this point, based on feedback we heard from the community presentation and from the YMCA, looking at a 25-yard pool. Earlier discussions was talking about a 25-meter, but the YMCA and other community members expressed that the 25-yard would be a more appropriate for an outdoor pool like this. And then we have the activity pool that includes a zero-depth entry point on one side of the pool that works down to about a 3 to 3.5 foot deep sort of play recreational area here in the middle. And then we have a water slide that would drop down into, again, like a 3.5 meter or 3.5 foot splash in zone. Some other features on this activity pool include sort of submerged seating benches around the activity area, a large set of steps that could be used for early swimmer education and swim lessons, and then a scattering of sort of water splash interactive toys in this shallow water area. Those could be bubblers, those could be elements that kids can turn on and off valves to create sort of water geysers and that sort of feature. Included in the design right now on the lap pool is a 3/4 meter diving board, and then today we're going to talk about some options that could either be included into the scope of the work or supplement what we've got shown right now. So when I talked with Josh last month about what sort of information to present, he and I talked about looking at 5 or 6 different types of pool features that you will see often around the area, and then trying to get a sense of a rough order of magnitude cost associated with each of those options. So the first item to look at is the idea of a high dive or a 3-meter board, and I asked Justin if he could help provide some information and imagery that we could be looking at today. So he's here to help answer any questions that I cannot answer that you might have. So first option, 3-meter springboard or a 3-meter dive platform. This would be your springboard here. This is an example of a more fixed dive platform. Costs for those are going to range anywhere from around $32,000 to $80,000, depending on the specific type that's used, and that would be just the cost for that pool feature itself. I think also that one of the cost parameters or cost ramifications of this option that isn't necessarily reflected in our site plan right now is that with the higher dive platform, we would need to be looking at a deeper water depth in the deep end of the pool. Second option we have put together is what they call kind of a drop slide. So this image up in the upper right is actually a project that our office designed many years ago at Amazon Pool in Eugene. This was a project that we did in Hermiston, out in Hermiston several years ago. And sort of similar to the high dive board or the diving boards, this would be a slide that drops you out at the deep end of the lap pool. Next option we looked at is what is called a vortex. So it's basically a large body of water, has some jets built into the sidewalls to create a little bit of a current that runs around the perimeter of that space. Cost for that, assuming that we're not increasing the overall area of pool water bodies that we're showing right now, is around $90,000 for that additional wall area, jets, pumps, and that sort of feature. The next one we looked at was what they call a lazy river or a current channel. Again, depending on, assuming that we're not necessarily increasing pool surface area, a feature like this might run somewhere around $100,000. Rope swings, and Justin, you can chime in if I've got this wrong. I tried looking for some examples of a rope swing that might work at an outdoor pool. I know people have talked about the rope swing that's out at the Madras Aquatic Center, but that was an indoor pool where I believe the rope is tied to the roof structure itself. But this would be one that would be fixed to the pool deck, and that might run around $3,000.
For clarification there, just real quick, Scott, the two pictures are of aqua zip-ins, so the one on the left and the upper right, that's a manufactured item, and that's about $15,000.
Okay.
The $3,000 was really just saying if you created something to hang it from.
I see.
Yeah.
Thank you. And the last item we were looking at would be some sort of enhanced splash pad area. This would be maybe a part of the pool deck that's outside of the water bodies themselves with various types of interactive play features, whether they're little geysers or more fixed elements with buckets that splash water down. And just depending on the scope of that, you can see that the cost implications start to grow pretty quickly, just depending on how large of an area it is, how many new pumps you need, what sort of features there are. So $150,000 to $450,000. So those were the items that I had talked about with Josh to try to bring a little information to you today, so we can start a discussion about each of the features.
Thank you. Council, do you have questions? DJ?
I do have a question, not on any of these amenities, but just in the general conversation. Handicap accessibility is really important for all the areas of the pool. Like, we currently don't have handicap accessibility in the deep end of the pool now, but we do in the shallow end. Is this something that we can make consideration for at this point?
Yeah, I believe we are already planning on that. So for the way that we've handled it, or at least my office has handled it in the past for the lap pool, the deep end, is we will usually set up a couple locations along the pool deck where there could be a portable wheelchair lift to bring someone into the water. And that's what this little element over here is indicating.
Very good, thank you.
Rick?
Thank you for the presentation. I realize when it comes to pool depth, a lot of it now is by regulation rather than by choice. But when it comes to looking at a high dive board versus a slide, would the same depth requirement be there for a slide as it would be for a diving board?
When you say slide, do you mean like that drop slide option that we were looking at?
Yes.
Justin, can you talk about that?
Sure. So the height of the slide is going to dictate the depth of the pool. Most drop slides like this are safe for use, and manufacturer recommended water depth is somewhere around 10 feet. A 1 meter springboard has a minimum required depth of 11'6", and a 3 meter goes up to 12'6". We typically go 6 inches deeper, just in case regulations change at some time. But you could go to a higher drop slide or some other sort of amenity that could alter those depths. We could also look at a different kind of slide that could dump into, say, 3.5 feet of water. So I think there's a lot of flexibility there.
Thank you.
Rob?
So a 1 meter or a 3 meter, that's the height off the water that the board is that correct?
Correct. It's from the plummet to the bottom of the pool. So the end of the board to the bottom of the pool.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you for sharing these options with us. Regarding the high dive or the platform, in the presentation it talks about a 3 meter for each. Do either of you happen to recall the height of the platform at the Amazon pool? Because I believe it's higher than 3 meters.
I can double check. I thought it was a 3 meter platform that we had there, but I can make a note and dig into that information.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just saw on the slide after that has the drop slide photos. If you look at the photo of the Amazon pool, you'll actually see the platform right in front of it, and it's considerably higher than the high dive right next to it, which makes me think.
Looks like a 5 meter platform to me.
Yep. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the current design depth for the pool is it 12 and a half right now? For the deep end?
Let me go to the slide with that pool plan. So we're at 10'8" right now, and that was just with the assumption of using a three-quarter meter board.
Okay, 10'8". So we would need, if we did decide to go with some sort of platform or high dive, we would have to, at a minimum, meet 12.6. So we would be having to add 22 inches of depth.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Rob?
So at least, this is at least the second meeting, if not the third meeting, that we've been asking questions or needing to know the answer to what our geology is in that pool area and how deep can we go. So what is the holdup, or when can we get that answered? That could be for Brad, it could be for Brad, it could be for the pool person, you know, I'm not sure.
I don't know, from what I remember seeing in the geotech report, there was nothing that would indicate to me that there would be a problem going deeper. We're not hitting any sort of bedrock or anything like that. So the possibility of going down deeper is there. It's just, call it a cost issue in terms of that extra excavation.
Brian?
Yeah, just as a comment to Rob, I think the existing Caveman Pool depth is deeper than the design depth of this pool. I think, I might be wrong, but I think it's maybe 11 and a half right now. So it'd only be like another foot deeper. But I did have one more question about, I know that there's requirements for open space around the pool area, around the pool. I guess the pool deck needs to be a certain width.
Usually 8 foot clear around all edges of the pool.
Okay, great, thank you.
I have a question about the pool building. I know there was a concern from some of the lifeguard staff that there be visibility of the pool deck from the offices, from the lifeguard office. And I think you said that's remedied by this little bump out that we're seeing?
Yeah, it's not reflected on this plan. Let me pull up the other one that Bradley had shown before. That was the revised plan for the bathhouse.
And then is there a snack bar somewhere?
In discussions with Josh and his discussions with the Y, the idea is that in this reception check-in desk here in the lobby, there would be space for the snack bar that would serve clients.
So people would come back into the lobby for that?
Correct.
And then the reasoning for moving the pool house over towards the parking lot instead of being on the corner of the intersection, what is that?
So we were looking, when we started the project, we looked at a couple different site layouts. We had one option where the bathhouse was closer to the intersection, kind of matching the existing. The idea here was, what this allowed was to kind of put the pools very much on display along the intersection and the sidewalks. It also put the lobby and entry points closer to the parking, just for more immediate access. The other advantage with this layout is with the east-west orientation, we've got a sort of a better opportunity for considering either photovoltaics or solar or hot water heating system on the roof of the bathhouse.
Okay, and then as far as the layout of the two spaces goes, the activity pool and the main pool, is that main pool taking advantage of the hole that's already there?
Correct. That was exactly why we put that there. It sits the deep end of the pool that you see there is sitting right about where the deep end of the existing pool was, or is.
Brian?
Yeah, I just had one more question. This is maybe a little bit taking a step back and kind of, you know, I know you're design experts for pool facilities, and so, you know, when you're seeing municipalities and other organizations design and build new recreational pools, I think one of the things that we're grappling with is, obviously what amenities to include. And we have some amenities here, and we're kind of grappling with maybe, I guess, some of these amenities that could be seen as, I don't know, maybe a little bit higher risk potentially, like the platform or the high dive. But I do know that there are other facilities in the state that operate those kinds of facilities. Are those types of amenities fairly common in recreational pools, or are they more rare? Or can you just speak to because I think that there's a little bit of apprehension about pursuing those amenities, and if you could just maybe speak to your experience with them, that'd be great.
Justin, can you take that particular question?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I think in general, there's been a move over the last decade to do more high-risk amenities, more high-thrill amenities, in a way that can be iterative and thoughtful. So we provide that thrill with minimizing the risk. One example of that would be looking at the 3-meter board that's on the screen now. We put a surface called Life Floor underneath the 3-meter ladder, so that if someone were to fall, they would have a dry playground, concussion attenuation surfacing that's ASTM certified. When we do platforms now, like the concrete platforms, and you can see it's a little bit more gradual of a climb. It's more like a ship's ladder in the picture, but we're doing staircases now in most of those instead of ladders to again reduce risk. The goal of the Modern Aquatic Center is truly to provide a place where everyone can come and play, regardless of their age, ability, comfort level of water, to provide something for everyone in the entire family generation, all walks of life. And so one of the hardest groups to entertain, of course, is those, late single-digit preteens and the teenage years. And if we can provide something as simple as a 10-foot tall thing they can jump off of, they're going to be much more inclined to come back again and again. So to answer your question directly, there are a lot of facilities in Oregon that have these. For areas that are more risk averse for whatever reason, could be the operator YMCA saying, we just don't do that at our facilities. Then you look at those moving water, the lazy river, the vortex, those sort of things, to again just provide something else that people can do other than jump in and out of a pool or some laps.
Great, thank you for that insight.
With regards to something like the vortex pool, are you imagining that would be attached to the activity pool?
Yeah, our thought process, I don't want to speak for Scott, of course, but our thought process is typically they're part of that activity pool, part of the multi-purpose pool. They can be used for therapy purposes in addition to recreational purposes. So, walk against the current or swim against the current. And then you can turn them on and off. So they're a great small group space when you have a specific class that doesn't require current.
I would agree with exactly everything Justin just said.
Okay, and with regards to the activity pool, what exactly is planned for it now? It looks like it has that zero depth entry with some splash toys and then a slide.
Pull up a little larger slant there. So yes, we have a slide, so a staircase up to a flume slide that would drop you down into that 42-inch deep water basin here. What I've seen in these sorts of areas here is it could be set up for multiple activities such as water basketball or swim lessons, and then again we've got a collection of some sort of water toys. The selection hasn't been finalized yet. That's another discussion amongst us, but things with buckets or geysers or elements that kids can even interact with in terms of turning on and off the volume of water.
And then the other pool is sketched to be more of a basic pool, but some of these things like a diving platform or a drop slide could be added on?
Correct. It would be on that lap pool where you'd probably see something like the drop slide or dive boards like the one we showed here in these initial renderings, or the high dive board or platforms.
Is there any information that you're aware of about, from other pools about kind of what percentage of use each of these types of pools would get? Like whether most of the people play at one or the other?
Justin, that might be a question that you might have a little bit more insight on.
Sure. It really depends based on a lot of factors. For instance, the demographic, within your area, the age, the ability, the other competing facilities. If there are other facilities close by that offer water park amenities, for instance, someone who lives halfway between Grants Pass and Medford may be going to Medford because they've got 2 big slides and an interactive climb-on structure, and so it might minimize the need for you to do that here, or vice versa. Maybe because they're building that, you want to provide something larger here. In general terms, though, to answer your question directly, the lap pool is going to be very busy for swim team use early in the morning, right after school through the evening hours, and it's not going to be as busy during the day. You'll certainly get your lap swimmers, your fitness swimmers, and those things. And that's if you extend into shoulder seasons. During the summer, it's going to be fairly similar, although swim teams do alter their times in the summer. And I'm not sure exactly how that happens in your community, but swim team use will dominate that pool. The other pool is going to be really busy on weekends, really busy on hot days, to the point where you'll have 6 to 1, people in that pool versus in the lap pool. One of the things we look at with these rectilinear bodies of water, like the lap pool, is using more inflatables, things that can add that fun element into it. Those can be additional revenue opportunities as well when you sell wristbands or what have you, birthday party rentals. So we can do some things to make that pool a little bit more entertainment based and not just, someone swimming laps over a little black line.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. I did a kind of informal survey with some middle school students last week, and I had 2 different groups of middle school students, and they both mentioned inflatable rentals. But it's been my experience with public pools like this that there's an apprehension maybe on the part of management to do inflatables because it blocks visibility. But are you seeing it at other places?
Yeah, in fact, we just finished with the fall trade show season, and I was talking with several different manufacturers of those inflatables, and every single one of them had their best year ever last year by over 30%. So that, proof's in the pudding that people are buying them. Also, when we talk to operators about using them, provided you can have enough staff, they're extremely popular. Where you do have staff concerns, which is an issue within the aquatics industry and other industries as well, they won't get as much use because you need at least one person on either side, and preferably a rover or someone in the water as well.
Thank you. Brian?
Yeah, I wanted to, float an idea that actually was brought to me from Counselor Pell, who I think heard from maybe some of those same middle schoolers. And the idea was having the potential for some sort of half-court basketball court outside of the pool, but inside the fence line of the pool, with the idea that there would be, more engagement, and you would get more kids staying there longer because they could get out and play basketball and get all hot and then go play in the pool and kind of go back and forth. Have you seen anything like that, or have you worked with any facilities that have anything like that?
Let me take that, Scott.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of those dry amenities as resort-style amenities, that you would see take the family down to Mexico, wherever, where they've got a lot of different things going on, then you just walk back and forth to the pool. That could be bocce ball, that could be shuttleboard, that could be basketball, that could be dry volleyball. We try to avoid sand volleyball around pool environments. It can mess with the water chemistry a little bit, and the sand just blows everywhere. But any of those turf-based sports certainly provide another layer of that, you know, providing something for the entire family, so everyone can come and enjoy the facility. Because you raise a great point. I mean, if you've got 4 kids, chances are one of them may or may not, you know, enjoy water as much as the others. So providing something for them to do, and then we'll work. You know, Scott will put some outdoor showers off so you can wipe the grime and sweat off them before they jump back in the water.
Great, thank you.
Has anybody asked our swim teams? I don't know that we have an active summer swim team that is interested in using the pool. Does anybody know? Not off the top of your head, Brian?
I mean, as far as I know, we just have the high school swim team at this point. I'm not sure what the status is of the summer swim team.
Okay. Just, he did mention that it's sometimes 6-to-1 use on the activity pool versus the regular lap pool during summer recreation hours. So I guess I would just ask everybody to keep that in mind as we move forward, that my own personal experience with my 2 kids was that the amenities are where it's at these days. And, you know, from the time they were babies and we were using that 0 depth entry toddler pool area up until they were teenagers and going for more of the high drop pools and twirly slides and all that business. That's where it's at. Joel has a question.
Well, it's just a comment, Sarah. When we had the pool committee, we did have a coach of the swim team. And they do use the outdoor pool. It doesn't invalidate what you just said, but it is a high use, and a lot of our kids have been on that team. And they travel around to swim meets around the state, from Lakeview over to the coast in the summertime.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I know it has been used a lot that way in the past. I just wasn't sure if they were still using it for that. All right, any other questions for our consultants? Vanessa.
It's not in relation to amenities, it's kind of changing gears, but we had a discussion recently, Councilor De La Grange and I, and a concerned constituent and Aaron, about the heating system for the pool. And I don't know if this is the appropriate time to talk about that, but I did want to ask if there was any consideration to a solar thermal heating system versus utilizing natural gas outright, and what the cost benefit long-term may be for that.
So one of the things that we're going to wrap into our final schematic design report that would include the cost estimate is looking at a couple options. One would be your more traditional natural gas-fired boiler system for pool heating. One would be an all-electric boiler system for that, and then one would be what is called a heat pump chiller. So it's a little bit more high-end, more energy efficient, all-electric system. So we've got recommendations on models and sizing from our mechanical engineers, and we'll give that to the cost estimator and have those as sort of like alternate pricing options for you to consider.
Thank you.
Rick?
In a lot of private homes, you see a rubber bladder heater system for their pools. Does that work on large pools as well, such as the one we're talking about?
It can. You know, in fact, at Amazon Pool, we don't have the rubber bladder systems, but we have more like a fixed shell solar water heating system. And what I've heard in the past on that one is it actually is a little bit too efficient in that it can overheat the water in the summertime. But it's certainly an option for pools like this.
So in your follow-up later on different ideas, will it include information on that type of system?
Yeah, I believe one of the next steps that we'll be doing is setting up meetings and consultations with the Energy Trust of Oregon, who will help us kind of evaluate various technologies and see what seems to make the most sense from a functional standpoint as well as from a cost standpoint.
Thank you.
Brian? Oh, he's good. Okay, any other questions?
Before you do your deliberation, Chad Westbrook did confirm our current pool is 10.
Thanks.
10 foot deep.
10 foot deep, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I think just to touch base on where we're at price-wise right now, I think, have you done any sort of cost estimation or what are?
No, it was our understanding to wait on giving information to our cost estimator until we've had today's discussion, so we could be able to direct them on any sort of amenities or features we might want to price as options to the project. He's ready to go. I let him know that we were having this meeting today, and assuming we can, we make some sort of decision, he's ready to start working on it this week, next week.
Okay, so we don't have a base price to know where we're at with regards to these extra amenities?
Right.
Okay. Rob?
So to more clear, and I don't know if this was Sarah's question, but it's my question. So regardless of what the amenities are, we have no ballpark at all as to what a bare bones pool of this footprint would be? No, I was trying to get an idea of what percentage of the total price these amenities would turn out to be. A ballpark of what a bare bones pool would be with essentially none of the amenities. Do we have a figure?
When we were working on, over the last couple of weeks, trying to put together scope of work for the next stage of design and trying to figure out fees for our consultants and that sort of thing, Carl Sherwood and I did do some back of the napkin sketch estimating based upon a couple other projects we did about 10 years ago that were similar in scope to what you see on the screen right now, meaning bathhouse of about that size, same sort of size pool, body waters, and trying to adjust as best we could for inflation over that last 10 years. We were coming up with about $6.5 million for a construction cost.
Thank you.
And then when we talk about extra amenities, I'm going to assume that some of these require extra staffing and some of them may not. Is that fair? I mean, as far as lifeguard staffing, if I just pick one, let's say we wanted to add a small lazy river on the edge of this activity pool, does it require an extra lifeguard or two if there's a lazy river?
Dustin, do you have any thoughts on that?
So most likely it would. A lazy river, the attraction itself doesn't require anything. It's the line of sight, right? Because now you have a raised bond beam. So you need to be able to see on both sides or if there's angles involved. Same thing with, you can see the picture there. I mean, anything that's raised produces a potential or, a dark zone where you can't see. So if you're asking me in general terms, how many extra lifeguards would be needed during hours of operation, I would say one if you have a lazy river or vortex, just because you're going to want to ensure that you have a clear line of sight to, all the water.
And then with slides or a diving platform, is it typical to have an additional lifeguard like manning each attraction?
Yeah, so depending on the slide, the drop slides typically would just be one extra staff. They'd just be dedicated watching the water, but helping, police the traffic at the ladder as well. With a more traditional water slide, you typically see two because now one's required to be at the top, on the landing, and then one down below. For your rope swings, one probably would be enough, thing with the aqua zipping. For the great thing about a splash pad is there is no additional staff needed because there's no standing water. That doesn't seem like, you can do a lot of that same program within the beach entry portion of the activity pool. So that may or may not be more or less attractive because of that, but the benefit of a splash pad is it does not require a lifeguard. What other amenities do we have? Water basketball, water volleyball, unless they're instructor-led, typically don't require an additional staff member. Am I missing anything?
I think that covered all the ones that we talked about today.
Just a quick question on that. We currently, in the plan we have right now, we have the 3/4 meter board. If we were to go to a platform or a 3-meter high dive, does that change staffing? Is there, I guess, does the 3/4 meter dive require an extra lifeguard or no?
I would think any time you have that amenity open, you're going to want to have it staffed. To prevent people from being in the landing zone, to get people back to a ladder who had just gotten into the pool, those sorts of things. Every lifeguard protocol, or Starfish, all the different ones that are out there, Ellison Associates, they all recommend that diving boards have a dedicated attendant when in use.
Thank you.
Rob?
So the splash pads that are pictured in the handout, it would just seem like, I'm just wondering, if a splash pad were smaller, would it reduce the price much? Because we've got all that paved area around the pools. I could see how any one of these, how the price tag could go way up if you started with nothing and you had no pavement, no concrete, there was nothing there. But I'm just wondering if, to increase essentially overall attraction for someone that might have much younger children, along with some slightly older, older kids, you could have, if you had a smaller splash pad near the kiddie pool, so to speak. I'm just wondering if there's a way essentially to not spend $150,000 or $450,000 to have a small splash pad near the kiddie pool.
So I'll field that one if that's okay, Scott.
Yep.
So splash pads are considered by Oregon Code to be their own body of water. So if we have a splash pad, it needs, let me take one step further back. There's two types of splash pads. One would be a flow-through system where you just have potable water. It runs through and then it goes off to either be used as gray water or into your storm or sanitary system. That's not very sustainable. It's something that our firm does not recommend. We do everything we can to prevent people from doing that because it's just not a great solution for environmental reasons. However, it is legal by code, so my job as a consultant is to make you aware of all your options. That is a very inexpensive system. That could be somewhere around $100,000. You're paying for the concrete, thickened concrete that's good for use in water, wear and tear with UV, and then a booster pump and the features themselves. If we go to a recirculating system, it's treated exactly like a pool under Oregon Code. So now we need our own set of filters, pumps, heaters if you're going to heat it. They typically are not heated, but if you do, there's a cost there. A UV system for secondary disinfectant is highly recommended by all national codes and mandated by most, not mandated in Oregon, but we'd still recommend it. That kills things like Cryptosporidia, Giardia, E. coli instantly that are more prevalent in bodies of water where kids with diapers are going to be. Anyway, so you can start to see how those costs go. We also are required to have a 4,000 gallon, so a small hot tub, balance tank where the balancing of your water happens and occurs. So when we're talking about the actual cost of splash pads, size isn't really a determining factor. It's much more so in the equipment that's just a sunk cost on, 800 square foot splash pad or a 3,000 square foot splash pad. And that's where those, $350,000 to $400,000 for fairly bland splash pads, start that up.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Brian?
I'm sorry, I have one more. Regarding the depth of the pool, some of the amenities would require a deep end and some would not. Are we going to be able to kind of get a cost estimate for a pool that is a depth that needs to be for like a platform, and then also get, are we going to be able to see what the added cost is to have a deep end for that amenity?
We definitely can get that information from our estimator for comparison.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Nope. Okay, I think that's all our questions for now. Thank you. And council, any discussion? Brian?
Yeah, no, I'm really happy that we got this information, and it makes me more excited about the pool project, seeing the potential of what it can be and what we could do there. So I'm excited to see us move forward and hopefully pick one or two more amenities and get the project going.
And again, the way I was planning to sort of approach looking at pricing for various amenities is using what was, call it the base design that you see on the screen, and then looking at whatever amenities you find most appealing and treat those as alternate pricing so we can see what the cost difference add is for those.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, I think that I'm not sure what the admission to the pool was most recently, like this year, but I think that we as council would be wise to consider the fact that the greater the admission, obviously, the better that helps to absorb the cost of running the pool, whether that's paying the YMCA or whether the YMCA gets all that money. It should be more attractive to them. I would think that drop slides and things of that nature would do nothing but just increase admission, which in the long run essentially helps absorb the operating costs. I would think that, that would be true for whether or not we've got great amenities for little kids, whether or not we've got a drop slide or high dive. As Brian mentioned earlier, I also am very sure that if there was some kind of basketball court or half court, it would also increase the number of admissions. They're just another reason for as they say, single digit or young teens or whatever to want to spend the day at the pool if they can go play basketball and swim. So the more attractive we can make this, while it's an upfront cost, in the long run, I think actually it's going to essentially be a money saver as far as being able to cover operating costs.
Other feedback? No? Okay, what's the next step here? What's our timeline, I guess?
Well, I believe Scott stated that the cost estimators could begin work either next week or the following week. In your slide deck, on the very last slide, I had potential next step alternatives. So we had RSA submitting those, next week or so, and then we are going to continue to engage with Energy Trust of Oregon. They've already, we've already been having conversations, but we'll continue to have that, particularly as you finalize, which amenities, because I think that's pretty critical today. If we could just get that, if there's one in particular, so that the cost estimators can come back with as accurate a cost as possible, as well as with this Energy Trust of Oregon conversation. So assuming that happens, and Scott, maybe you can add, but I mean, I was thinking, late December, early January, we would get that back, and then we would be bringing that specific number to you, to council, so that you know what that cost estimate is, and then the green light would have to be given to RSA to start phase 2, which is the engineering and the more detailed design on the project.
Right, I think that's correct. When I had initial discussions with the cost estimator, they would need about 2 weeks to do their work. Given that we're kind of going into the Christmas season, he might want a little bit more time just because everyone is out of the office and about doing things. But end of the year seems realistic to have some numbers back to present to you.
Sure. We're not going to get to it for another month anyway. I guess for the council, a couple of these ideas require a little bit different layout or different construction concept, whereas some of them, maybe the rope swing and the drop slide are things that can be added on to this base plan. So they need some feedback about whether we want them to provide estimates based on the plan that's been provided here, or whether you want something different. Brian?
Well, I don't know if this is what they're asking for, but I think from what I've seen at different pools and my experiences with what is, I guess, popular with people that go to municipal pools is some sort of something that is high to jump off of, whether it's a high dive or a platform. Personally, my experience at the Amazon pool, the jumping platform was just as popular as the water slide, and those were probably the two most popular amenities. And given that we are, a river town with the Rogue River and the Illinois River nearby that are both very popular swimming spots, and people do a lot of jumping out there. So I, in some sense, feel it's fitting that we have some sort of jumping platform at the pool as sort of, I guess, training wheels for younger people to learn how to do that properly in a safe way where they're supervised before maybe they're going out and doing it where it's more dangerous. So personally, I think that the platform is what I would advocate for the pool. I've seen it be successful at other pools, and I think it would fit our community really well.
Rob?
I would basically agree with Brian. I'd like to actually maybe know from the pool experts. To me, it would seem as though a platform would inherently be somewhat safer than actually a diving board, a high diving board from the same height, because it would seem as though very uninitiated first-timers would have much less chance of potentially hurting themselves going off a platform. I know that virtually every teenager that I know, and I had 4 kids come through Grants Pass, anytime they went out swimming on the Illinois or wherever else, it almost always included jumping off the rocks, and that's for myself included. So yeah, jumping is definitely, going from some height is definitely a big attraction for essentially all kids. To me, it would really be I don't know, I think we'd be missing a big opportunity if we didn't have at least a platform. I would think that a platform's got to be safer than the dive. I was I liked hearing today that they're using materials underneath the platforms of the dive that are a little softer to land on if someone were to fall off a step or a ladder or whatever, kind of a non-concussive playground type of material. That makes a lot of sense also, and I was happy to hear that. But do we have any data, or we have any sense of which one of those two things, whether it's a diving board or a dive platform, would inherently be safer or have less liability?
I don't have any data, unfortunately. I can't say from I share your thoughts, I guess is a good way to say that. We can, with a platform, we can put a rail all the way around it on 3 sides. We can have a stair instead of a ladder that leads up to it. Another benefit of a platform is, I don't know if ROTC training is a thing there, but that certainly is a requirement for ROTC training. We could put a rope swing on the bottom of it. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do when you start to talk about a platform that can add some excitement and some versatility.
Any other comments? We have 2 people interested in a platform. Vanessa's interested also. Okay, DJ's interested. Yeah, I guess DJ's interested. We're interested in getting a price then for what it would cost to add a platform and the extra depth that might be required for that.
Okay.
And then it sounds like a couple of these things we could probably add on at some point, even several years down the road if we wanted to. If it's built in a way that allows some space, right, for additional slides or
the splash pad, just making sure that we have space available in the fence line.
Rob?
I'm also very interested in a drop slide for the deep pool, and did they also mention a more gentle slide for the kiddie pool? Did they also mention that earlier? Because I'd be
we do have kind of as our base for our base scope of work, a slide that goes into the shallow water activity pool.
Okay, so that's included in the base scope.
That would be in the base scope, yes.
Okay, great.
A couple of things that didn't get mentioned here, but I guess artistically or aesthetically, the kids that I spoke with last week did mention the idea of having some sort of design in the bottom of the pool that says like "We Are GP" or something that, you know, is kind of makes it visually fun. And I've also heard a suggestion of playing on the cave theme and maybe even having the platform or something look like a rock wall. So might be something to consider, having a little fun with the look of things.
And
Okay.
a sign that says "No climbing on the rock wall."
That's right. Anyway, just something to think about.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Brian?
I just maybe would mention one more thing regarding a dry amenity like a half-court basketball court. If, you know, if in their work they, you know, might be able to identify one or two spots or even just one spot where something like that could potentially go. I know it's kind of a tight site, so if they feel that there's a spot that it could go, that'd be great. And if they feel that it's too tight and there's no room, it'd be nice to know that as well.
We can certainly, in our final schematic design report, update the site plan to show locations for options of that sort. I think also, you know, thinking location for if you wanted to think about a splash pad down the road, just making sure we kind of got a logical spot where it could go.
Joel? Joel, can you hear us?
I'm fine. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Okay, well, that sounds good. Do our designers, do you have any further questions for the council?
No, what I heard today is definitely having as a price out alternate a dive platform and perhaps a drop slide as a second option to price out. Include in the pricing, or at least identified on the site plan, the dry amenities, the half court basketball court. At least in terms of how it influences our final design report and pricing.
Okay, terrific, thank you. Anything else, Aaron? Okay, I think we are good then on that one. Thanks for being with us today. And next up is agenda review.
Thank you, everyone, and sorry again for the mix-up on my technology.
No problem. All right, we have a meeting coming up Wednesday evening with public hearings on the CDBG Year 3 CAPER approval, a resolution on the citizen participation plan, also for the CDBG, an ordinance that would amend the zoning map, an ordinance that would change Development Code Article 7 regarding UAPC membership, ordinance on the comprehensive plan, element 7 for Parks and Recreation comprehensive plan. Council action items are an annexation for the Lazitz Estates subdivision and ordinance that would create a reimbursement district for the, an amendment for the reimbursement district municipal code. Then the consent calendar has a resolution that would award the library sewer project, a resolution to amend the comprehensive fee schedule, a motion that would acknowledge the monthly investment report, and a resolution to purchase Motorola radios. And then our next council workshop, and the last meeting we have planned for December, is going to be hearing the results from the Public Safety Funding Survey, which wraps up today. If anybody hasn't filled out that survey yet and would like to, it's on the city's website. And then we will have an executive session regarding labor as well as the performance evaluation. Any questions about those items? Dwayne?
I'm just hoping on, can you hear me? On December 18th, we can at least vote on a public safety level and all counselors be ready for at least that vote.
We usually don't make votes during
Well, I'm just asking
workshops.
that question, that we can at least give a signal on what we're going to do for them for level of service. And then I have a question about Allenwood property, the thing that you sent to us and then I sent back about a timeline. No response from you guys there. I just wonder what it was going to be changed to or stay at 30 days. For the RFI.
Well, we can extend the date. We can issue an extension of the date if that's deemed, if you've heard that may be appropriate.
Well, the people I've talked to said 30 days is not even close to enough time to get something together to the city, so.
Certainly, we can do an amendment to that and send it out with 45 or even 60 days to provide a response back.
I would, at least 60 or 90 days would better be the best from what I'm hearing.
Sure, we'll do that.
With regards to the December 18th workshop, we will be discussing public safety funding, and then we have it slated again to come up on January 8th. So I'm not sure what you can expect in terms of feedback or decisions, Councilor Younger, but it's on the agenda. All right. Any other items that anybody wants to get on the agenda coming up? All right. How about a motion to adjourn? Brian?
I move to adjourn.
Seconded by Rick. All in favor of adjourning the workshop today, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, see you Wednesday.